I stand at the edge of my property in the dying light of another day, watching shadows stretch across the pasture like fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. The toolbox weighs heavy in my right hand, its metal corners cutting into my palm, while my left rests on the weathered fence post that separates my modest patch of earth from the sprawling ranch beyond. The wood is rough beneath my touch, splintered and gray from years of neglect, leaning in an angle that speaks of surrender. 45 years on this earth, and I have learned that some things break slowly, then all at once. This fence is one of them. My marriage, perhaps, is another, though I do not allow myself to think such things in the clear light of day. Only here, in these moments between afternoon and evening, when the world holds its breath, do thoughts like these rise unbidden from the depths where I've kept them buried. The air is still, thick with the scent of dry grass and distant cattle. I set the toolbox down with a dull thud and kneel beside the base of the post, running my fingers along the crack that has been widening for months. Miriam mentioned it again this morning over coffee, her voice carrying that particular note of resignation she has perfected over the years. "The fence needs fixing," she said, not looking up from her newspaper. "The Henderson cattle keep wandering through." I told her I would see to it today, as I have been telling her for weeks. But each time I walked out here, something held me back. Not laziness exactly, something deeper. As though this fence, this boundary between my world and the one beyond, served a purpose I was not ready to abandon. The sun hangs low now, casting everything in shades of amber and rust. I open the toolbox and remove a hammer, its handle worn smooth by decades of use. My father's hammer, though I try not to think of that either. There are too many ghosts in the weight of familiar tools, too many echoes of the man I might have been if I had possessed even a fraction of a certainty about the shape a life should take. I am measuring the length of the broken rail when I hear it. A voice calling from somewhere beyond the barn that sits squat and weathered on the Henderson property. The sound carries across the distance, though I cannot make out words. I look up, shading my eyes against the slanted light, and that is when I see him. He emerges from the shadow of the barn, like something conjured from the golden hour itself. Bare-chested, his skin bronzed to the color of old leather, muscles shifting beneath the surface as he moves with an easy, unhurried grace. Rowan Henderson. Victor Esson. I have not seen him in months, not since he returned from whatever life he tried to build in the city, carrying defeat in the set of his shoulders and something else in his eyes that I could not name then and dare not name now. He walks toward the fence line, and I find myself frozen in a crouch beside the broken post, hammer suspended halfway to its target. His jeans are streaked with dust and wear his boots heavy with the kind of honest dirt that comes from real work. But it is his smile that undoes me, appearing as he draws closer, disarming in its openness, as though he has not noticed that I'm staring like a man who has forgotten how to breathe. "Good evening," he calls, and his voice is deeper than I remember, roughened by whatever trials sent him back to his father's land. Working late. I force myself to look away, fumbling with the hammer, my fingers suddenly clumsy as a schoolboy's. The fence, I manage, though the words come out rougher than intended. Storm damage. He stops a few feet away, close enough that I can smell the salt of honest sweat, the faint scent of hay and sun-warmed skin. When I glance up again, he is studying the broken rail with the kind of attention most men reserve for things that truly matter. "Mind if I take a look?" he asks, already moving closer, already crouching beside me before I can form an answer. His shoulder brushes mine as he leans in to examine the damage, and something electric passes between us, quick as lightning and just as dangerous. I tell myself it is nothing, less than nothing, but my heart hammers against my ribs with a rhythm that calls me a liar. The wood is rotted through, he observes, running his fingers along the break with a gentleness that makes my throat tighten. "You will need to replace the whole section, not just patch it." I nod, not trusting my voice, and in the silence that follows, I become aware of things I should not notice. The way his hair curls slightly at the nape of his neck, the constellation of freckles across his shoulders, the careful way he moves his hands, as though they have learned to create as well as destroy, to build as well as tear down. I have Wire back at the house. He continues, seemingly oblivious to the storm he has awakened in my chest. And Timber, Dad will not miss it. We could have this fixed by tomorrow evening, if you like. The offer hangs in the air between us, innocent enough on its surface, but weighted with something I cannot allow myself to examine too closely. I should decline, should thank him politely and send him back to his father's land, back to whatever life he is trying to rebuild in the shadow of his childhood. Should maintain the careful distance I have spent decades perfecting, the walls that keep dangerous thoughts at bay. Instead, I hear myself saying, that would be helpful. Thank you. He smiles again, and this time there is something different in it, something that makes me feel as though he has seen straight through the careful composure I wear like armor. No trouble at all, neighbor. I will bring the materials by in the morning. He stands, brushing dust from his knees, and for a moment I think he will simply walk away, leaving me to wrestle with the sudden emptiness his absence would bring. But instead, he pauses, looking down at me with an expression I cannot read. Been a long time since we talked, Elias, he says, and the sound of my name in his mouth does something to me that I do not have words for. Too long, maybe. Before I can respond, before I can even begin to untangle the knot of confusion and longing that has formed in my chest, he is walking back toward the barn, his figure growing smaller in the gathering dusk. I watch until he disappears into the shadows, then sit back on my heels, staring at the broken fence as though it holds answers to questions I am afraid to ask. The air has grown cooler, and somewhere in the distance, Miriam is calling my name from the kitchen window. Dinner is ready, her voice implies, and the day's work should be done. I gather my tools with unsteady hands and walk back toward the house, but with every step, I feel something shifting inside me, like ice beginning to crack under the weight of an early spring. That night, I lie beside my wife in the darkness, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, feeling the familiar hollow in my chest expand until it threatens to swallow me whole. But for the first time in years, the emptiness is not complete. Something has been planted there, small and fragile as a seed, and though I know I should crush it before it takes root, I find myself guarding it instead, holding it close like a secret I am not yet ready to confess. The morning arrives pale and quiet, sunlight filtering through the gauze curtains of our bedroom like something apologetic. Miriam is already downstairs, her footsteps familiar against the worn linoleum of the kitchen floor. The sound reaches me through the thin walls of this house we have shared for 22 years, a rhythm as predictable as the changing seasons. Coffee percolating, cabinet doors opening and closing, the soft scrape of a chair being pulled away from the table. I dress in yesterday's work clothes, the same denim and flannel that have become like a uniform over the years. In the mirror above our dresser, I catch sight of myself and pause. When did the lines around my eyes deepen so? When did my hair begin its retreat from my temples, leaving behind this landscape of middle age that I barely recognize? 45 years, and I feel as though I'm looking at a stranger wearing my father's face. Downstairs, Miriam moves through her morning routine with the same graceful efficiency she has perfected over 2 decades. Her graying hair is pulled back in a simple bun, her house dress pressed and clean despite the early hour. She pours my coffee without looking up, adding the single spoonful of sugar I have taken since we were newlyweds, when such small gestures felt like declarations of love rather than habits worn smooth by repetition. The fence repair is starting today, I tell her, settling into my usual chair at the kitchen table, the one by the window that looks out over the pasture where our small herd of cattle graze in the distance. She nods, buttering toast with precise strokes. Victor's boy is helping, she observes, and there is something in her tone I cannot quite name. Not disapproval, exactly. Something more careful, more knowing. I take a sip of coffee to avoid responding immediately, tasting the familiar bitterness that has become synonymous with these quiet morning conversations. Rowan offered to lend a hand. I say finally. Neighborly thing to do. Miriam sets the butter knife down and looks at me directly for the first time since I entered the kitchen. Her eyes, still the same soft brown they were when we married, holds something I've learned not to examine too closely. She has always possessed an uncomfortable talent for seeing through the carefully constructed walls people build around themselves. He's been back almost 6 months now, she says, resuming her methodical breakfast preparation. Victor mentioned some trouble in the city. Art school, I think it was. Or something artistic, anyway. I grunt non-committally, though every word settles somewhere deep in my chest, where I have learned to store information I pretend not to care about. Art school. The detail fits with something I glimpsed yesterday in the careful way Rowan's hands moved over the broken wood, as though he saw beauty even in its decay. The kitchen falls back into its familiar silence, broken only by the tick of the wall clock and the distant lowing of cattle. Through the window, I can see the fence line where Rowan and I worked yesterday evening, the broken rail still hanging at its defeated angle. Soon he will arrive with wire and timber, and we will spend the day side by side, our conversation threading through the spaces between hammer strikes and the screech of nails being pulled from weathered wood. The thought should not bring the flutter of anticipation it does. After breakfast, I walk the perimeter of our small property, checking on the cattle and inspecting other sections of fencing that might need attention. The land is not much by local standards, barely 40 acres of pasture and farmland, but it has been enough to raise 2 children and maintain the modest life we built together. Our son Marcus lives in Denver now, works for an insurance company, and calls every other Sunday with updates about grandchildren I see twice a year. Our daughter, Sarah, married a man from the next county over and settled into a life that mirrors our own so closely it sometimes takes my breath away. Both of them left as soon as they were able, drawn by the promise of something larger, more exciting than what this small corner of the world could offer. I do not blame them. There was a time, long before I met Miriam, when I dreamed of leaving too, of seeing what lay beyond the horizon that has hemmed in my life since birth. But dreams like that require a kind of courage I never possessed. Or perhaps they require a willingness to disappoint people who depend on you, and I have never been able to stomach the weight of that particular failure. So I stayed, married the girl my parents approved of, raised children and cattle and crops with equal devotion, built a life that looks, from the outside, exactly like the one a man is supposed to want. The sun climbs higher, and I find myself returning to the broken fence more often than necessary, my eyes drifting toward the Henderson property where Victor's red barn sits squat and weathered against the morning sky. There is no sign of Rowan yet, but the day is still young, and I remind myself that he owes me nothing. Yesterday's offer might have been nothing more than neighborly politeness, the kind of casual kindness that binds small communities together without meaning anything deeper. But even as I tell myself this, I know I am lying. There is something in the way he looked at me, something in the careful space he maintained between us, while still managing to stand close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Men my age do not imagine such things. We are past the point where longing disguises itself as coincidence. I return to the house for lunch and find Miriam hanging laundry on the line behind the kitchen. The sight of her there, framed by white sheets that snap in the breeze like flags of surrender, fills me with a sadness so profound I have to stop walking and wait for it to pass. She has been a good wife, better than I deserve, probably. She deserves more than a husband who sits at the kitchen table each morning, staring out the window at a broken fence, and thinking thoughts he cannot share with a woman who has shared his bed for more than half his life. He arrives just after 2 o'clock, when the sun has reached its peak and the air shimmers with heat above the pasture. I am replacing a loose board on the barn door when I hear the rumble of an old truck engine, followed by the slam of a door that echoes across the stillness. My hands pause on the screwdriver, and I tell myself the sudden quickening of my pulse is nothing more than the natural response to an interruption in solitude. But when I turn and see him walking toward me, a coil of wire slung over one shoulder and a canvas tool bag in his hand, I know I'm lying to myself again. He has put on a white cotton shirt, though he has left it unbuttoned, and it moves around him like something alive as he crosses the distance between us. His boots kick up small clouds of dust with each step, and the sight is so ordinary, so unremarkable, that I cannot explain why it makes my chest tighten like a fist. Afternoon, he calls, raising his free hand in a gesture that falls somewhere between greeting and salute. Ready to get this fence back in fighting shape. I nod and set down my tools, wiping my hands on the front of my shirt in a gesture that feels suddenly self-conscious. The wire and timber are in the truck bed. He continues, jerking his thumb toward the dusty Ford parked beside my own vehicle. Should be enough to replace the whole section and maybe shore up the posts on either side. We work in silence at first, carrying materials to the fence line and laying them out in neat piles according to length and purpose. The sun beats down mercilessly, and within an hour, both of us have shed our shirts, hanging them on fence posts like flags of temporary surrender. I try not to notice the way sweat gleams on his shoulders, the careful economy of his movements as he measures and cuts and fits each piece into place. But trying not to notice Rowan Henderson is like trying not to notice a storm gathering on the horizon. Impossible and ultimately pointless. The work goes faster with two pairs of hands, and there is satisfaction in the rhythm we establish. He holds while I nail. I steady while he cuts. Our conversations begin simply, safely. Comments about the weather, the quality of the wood, the best way to set a post so it will hold against the next storm. But gradually, as the afternoon wears on, the spaces between our words grow longer, more comfortable, until the silence itself becomes a kind of conversation. You know, he says during one of these quiet interludes, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, I always wondered what it would be like to live here year-round. To never leave. The comment catches me off guard, coming as it does from nowhere, carrying weight I am not prepared to handle. I fumble with the nail, I am driving, striking my thumb instead of the head, and curse under my breath. Not much to wonder about. I reply when I have regained my composure. Same as anywhere else, I suppose. Just smaller. He is quiet for a moment, considering this, his hands never pausing in their work. But then he looks at me directly, and I feel pinned by the intensity of his gaze. Is it, though? The same as anywhere else? The question hangs between us like smoke, and I find myself unable to answer immediately. Was he asking, really? Whether small-town life offers the same possibilities, the same chances for reinvention and discovery. Whether a man can build the life he truly wants within the boundaries of familiar fields and well-worn routines. Or is he asking something else entirely? Something about the particular weight of staying when every instinct screams for flight. Most people seem to think so. I say, finally, driving another nail with more force than necessary. Otherwise, they would not keep leaving. He laughs, but there is no humor in the sound. Just recognition. Yeah, I tried that. Leaving. Thought the city would make me into someone different. Someone better, maybe. And did it. The question slips out before I can stop it, more direct than any I've asked in years. He pauses in his work, considering, and when he speaks again, his voice carries a roughness that was not there before. For a while, maybe, or I told myself it did. Found people who understood what I was trying to become. Made art that felt true, at least to me. Even fell in love with someone who saw the world the same way I did. The admission hits me like a physical blow, though I cannot say why. Of course, he has loved someone. Of course, there have been others who recognized whatever it is I am only beginning to glimpse in him. The surprise is not that he has experienced love, but that he speaks of it in the past tense, as though it were something lost rather than something that might be found again. What happened? I ask, though I am not certain I want to know the answer. He shrugs, returning to his work with renewed focus. Same thing that always happens, I suppose. Reality. Expectations. The weight of trying to be something you're not sure you really are. We work in silence after that, but the quiet feels different now. Heavier. Charged with the electricity of confession, of boundaries crossed and walls lowered just enough to let dangerous truths slip through the cracks. When he hands me a nail, his fingers brush mine, and neither of us pulls away immediately. The contact lasts only seconds, but it burns like a brand, marking something in me that I thought had been safely buried years ago. Do you ever regret staying? He asks as we pack up the tools at day's end, the fence now standing straight and strong between our properties. The question echoes the one he asked the day before, but this time it feels less casual, more like something he genuinely needs to know. I consider lying, offering the expected answer about duty and responsibility and the satisfaction of a life lived according to proper principles. Instead, I hear myself saying every day, but I have never known what else to do with regret except carry it. He nods as though this makes perfect sense, shouldering his tool bag and preparing to walk back to his father's land. Same here, he says, though I'm starting to think maybe carrying it is not the only option. That night, long after Miriam has gone to bed, I sit on the front porch steps and stare at the fence line we repaired. The wood looks pale in the moonlight, clean and strong, and ready to weather whatever storms might come. But for the first time in my adult life, I find myself wondering whether some boundaries are meant to be maintained and others are meant to be crossed. The days that follow take on a rhythm I have never known before. Rowan appears each morning like clockwork, always with some excuse that sounds reasonable enough on the surface. A broken gate latch that needs attention. A section of pasture fence that could use reinforcement. Wire left over from our repair project that should not go to waste. Each reason plausible. Each one a thin veil over something neither of us is ready to name. I find myself listening for the sound of his truck engine, the particular rumble that announces his arrival across the quiet pasture. When it comes, something in my chest loosens like a breath I have been holding without realizing it. When it does not, the day stretches ahead empty and colorless, filled with the same tasks I have performed for decades, but which now feel hollow, purposeless. We work together with an ease that surprises me. 23 years separate us, different generations shaped by different expectations, yet our hands seem to understand the same language when it comes to tools and timber, wire and wood. He anticipates what I need before I ask for it. I steady posts while he measures, hold boards while he cuts, and in these moments of shared purpose, something passes between us that feels both dangerous and necessary. The conversations come easier now, flowing like water, finding its natural course. He tells me about the city, about gallery openings where people stood around drinking wine and discussing art as though it were a commodity to be traded rather than something born from the raw need to make sense of an incomprehensible world. About the apartment he shared with Marcus, a name he speaks carefully, testing my reaction before continuing. About the paintings that filled every corner of their small space, canvases covered in colors that had no names in the limited palette of rural life. I listen and nod and ask the questions that seem expected, but what I really want to know is simpler and more complex than the details he offers. I want to understand how a man learns to speak his truth aloud, how he finds the courage to reach for what he wants instead of settling for what he thinks he should want. But these are questions I cannot ask without revealing too much about the landscape of my own longing. In return, I tell him things I have never spoken to another soul. About the scholarship to the state university that I turned down when my father's back gave out the summer before my 18th birthday. About the nights I lie awake listening to Miriam's breathing and wondering what my life would have looked like if I had possessed even a fraction of the courage my children showed when they left this place behind. About the weight of being reliable, dependable, the man others turn to when they need something fixed or lifted or endured. He listens without judgment, his attention complete and unwavering, and I realize it has been years since anyone has given me the gift of being truly heard. Not just the words I speak, but the silence between them, the things I cannot quite bring myself to say, but which hover in the air like heat shimmer. It is during one of these conversations, while we are replacing a gate hinge that has been squeaking for months, that I notice he has begun sketching again. The pad appears from his back pocket during our water breaks, and his pencil moves across the paper with quick, confident strokes. Cattle grazing in the distance. The barn with its weathered siding and sagging roofline. The fence line stretching toward the horizon like a promise or a threat. And sometimes, when he thinks I am not looking, he draws me. My hands wrapped around a hammer handle. My profile as I study a problem that needs solving. My figure bent over the gate mechanism, absorbed in the familiar puzzle of making broken things whole again. I should feel exposed by this, violated in some fundamental way. Instead, I feel seen, not just observed, but truly perceived, as though he recognizes something in me that I have spent decades trying to hide even from myself. The sketches are not flattering in any conventional sense. They show the lines around my eyes, the slight stoop that has developed in my shoulders from years of leaning over work. But they also capture something else, something that makes me look like a man worth studying, worth remembering. One afternoon, as we take shelter from a sudden thunderstorm in the relative dryness of my tool shed, he tears a page from his sketchbook and hands it to me without explanation. It is a drawing of my hands, weathered and scarred from decades of work, holding a fence post steady while invisible hands secure in place. The image is simple, almost stark, but there is something in the way he has captured the curve of my fingers, the particular angle of my wrist, that makes it feel intimate in a way that steals my breath. I study the drawing while rain drums against the shed roof, feeling something shift inside me, like tectonic plates, finding new positions after years of uncomfortable stability. These hands have built and repaired, planted and harvested, soothed children through nightmares, and held my wife during the difficult early years of our marriage when we were still learning how to love each other. But in Rowan's rendering, they look capable of tenderness I had forgotten they possessed. When I look up, he is watching me with an expression I cannot decipher, and the air between us feels charged with possibility and peril in equal measure. The storm passes, but something in the atmosphere has changed permanently, leaving us both a little breathless, a little afraid of what we might discover if we continue down this path we have begun to walk together. That evening, I find myself standing at the kitchen window long after dinner has been cleared away, studying the fence line we have worked so hard to repair. Miriam joins me there, her reflection appearing beside mine in the darkening glass. "You have been different lately," she observes, her voice carefully neutral. "Happier, maybe, or at least less restless." I do not know how to respond to this, so I say nothing. But her words settle in my chest like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that spread outward into corners of my heart I have kept carefully sealed for decades. The invitation comes on a Thursday evening, when the sun hangs low and everything is bathed in that particular golden light that makes even the most ordinary moments feel touched by something sacred. We have been working on a stubborn gate that refuses to hang straight, our shirts damp with sweat, our hands stained with rust and oil. The work is nearly finished when Rowan straightens, wiping his palms on his jeans, and looks at me with an expression I cannot quite read. "Come inside for a drink," he says, and though his tone is casual, there is something underneath it that makes my pulse quicken. "You have earned it after wrestling with that hinge all afternoon." I should decline, should gather my tools and walk back to my own house, where Miriam will have dinner waiting and the evening news will fill the silence between us with its familiar litany of distant troubles. Should maintain the careful boundaries that have kept my life stable and predictable for more than 2 decades. Instead, I hear myself saying yes. The Henderson house sits further back from the road than ours, older and larger, with the kind of wide front porch that suggests a time when families gathered there in the evenings to watch the sun set over their land. But it is not the porch we approach. Rowan leads me around to the kitchen door, the entrance reserved for family and close friends, and something about this choice feels significant in a way I cannot articulate. Inside, the house feels different from my own in ways both subtle and profound. Where Miriam and I have spent years accumulating the comfortable clutter of domestic life, this space feels deliberately spare, almost monastic. The furniture is simple but well-made, arranged with an eye for light and proportion that speaks of someone who understands the relationship between objects and the spaces they inhabit. But it is the walls that take my breath away. They are covered with canvases, dozens of them in various stages of completion. Landscapes that capture the particular quality of light at different times of day. Studies of cattle and horses rendered with an attention to detail that transforms them from mere livestock into individual beings with their own dignity and presence. And scattered among these familiar subjects are paintings that speak of another world entirely. City streets slick with rain. Gallery walls lined with abstract compositions. The interior of what might be an apartment, intimate and lived in, with 2 coffee cups sitting on a table beside an unmade bed. I move through the room slowly, studying each piece, feeling like an intruder in someone else's private universe. The work is good, better than good, shot through with a sensitivity and technical skill that would not look out of place in the galleries he told me about. But what strikes me most is how he has managed to capture the essence of things, the particular quality that makes a sunset over pastureland different from any other sunset, or the way morning light transforms the most ordinary barn into something that borders on the sublime. "Whiskey?" he asks from somewhere behind me, and I turn to find him standing beside a small kitchen table, 2 glasses already in his hands. The bottle between them is good bourbon, better than anything I keep in my own house, and I wonder briefly what other surprises this room might hold. We sit across from each other at the table, the glasses between us like a bridge we are both afraid to cross. The whiskey burns pleasantly as it goes down, warming me from the inside in a way that has nothing to do with the alcohol and everything to do with the strange intimacy of being here, in this space that clearly serves as both home and sanctuary. "Your work?" I say, gesturing toward the paintings that surround us. "It is remarkable." He shrugs, but I can see the pleasure my words bring, the way he sits a little straighter in his chair. Most of it is just practice. Try to remember how to see things clearly again. The phrase hangs in the air between us, weighted with meaning I am only beginning to understand. Try to remember how to see things clearly. As though clarity were something that could be lost and found again, like keys or reading glasses or any other misplaced object. "What happened?" I ask, the question slipping out before I can consider whether I have the right to know. "In the city, I mean. You mentioned trouble." He takes a long sip of whiskey, his eyes focused on something beyond the kitchen window. For a moment, I think he will not answer, that I have pushed too far, asked for more than he is prepared to give. But then he begins to speak, his voice quiet but steady. "I thought I knew who I was supposed to be. Had it all figured out. The art, the life, the person I was building it all with. Marcus and I, we had plans. A gallery showing. Maybe even a future together, though neither of us was brave enough to say that out loud." He pauses, rolling the glass between his palms, and I find myself holding my breath, afraid that any movement on my part might break the spell that has opened this window into his private pain. But plans have a way of colliding with reality. He continues. "His family found out about us, about what we were to each other, and suddenly all those dreams we had been building felt like houses made of cards, ready to collapse at the first strong wind. The silence that follows is heavy with recognition. I understand, perhaps better than he knows, what it means to discover that the life you thought you were building exists only in the fragile space between what you want and what the world will allow you to have. Have you ever wanted something you couldn't admit to anyone?" He asks suddenly, looking at me directly for the first time since he began speaking. The question hits me like a physical blow, not because it is unexpected, but because it is so precisely the thing I've been trying not to think about for weeks. Have I ever wanted something I cannot admit? The answer rises in my throat, like a confession that has been waiting decades for the right moment to emerge. But before I can find words, before I can summon the courage to speak the truth that has been growing inside me, like something wild and dangerous, he reaches across the table and places his hand over mine. The contact is light, tentative, ready to be withdrawn at the first sign of rejection. But I do not pull away, cannot pull away. Instead, I sit frozen in that moment, feeling the warmth of his palm against my knuckles, the slight calluses on his fingertips that speak of work both artistic and physical. For the first time in years, perhaps in my entire adult life, I feel the raw truth of who I am surged to the surface, demanding acknowledgement. Not the man I have pretended to be, not the husband and father and neighbor who does what is expected of him, but the person I might have been if I had possessed even a fraction of the courage that sits across from me now, holding my hand like an anchor in a storm I never knew I was weathering. Neither of us speaks. Neither of us moves. But in that silence, something fundamental shifts between us, like the moment when a river changes course and begins flowing toward an entirely new destination. I return home, that evening feeling like a man carrying live electricity beneath his skin. Every nerve ending feels exposed, hypersensitive to the ordinary touches of domestic life. The screen door closing behind me. The sound of my boots on the kitchen linoleum. Miriam's voice calling from the living room, asking if I remembered to pick up the mail. The sketch is in my shirt pocket, the one Rowan pressed into my hand as I was leaving, folded carefully so the charcoal would not smudge. I can feel its presence like a brand against my chest, a physical reminder of the evening that has just passed, of the moment when his hand covered mine and neither of us pretended it meant nothing. Dinner passes in a blur of familiar routines. Miriam serves pot roast and asks about my day, and I provide the expected responses while my mind remains fixed on the kitchen table in the Henderson house, on the weight of confessions shared in the dangerous territory we have begun to explore. She mentions a letter from Sarah, updates about the grandchildren, plans for the church social next weekend. I nod and respond appropriately, but my voice sounds strange to my own ears, like something played back on an old recording. Later, after the dishes have been cleared and Miriam has settled into her evening routine of reading and needlework, I excuse myself to check on the cattle. The sun has set, but the air still holds the warmth of the day, and I walk the fence line we repaired together, my fingers trailing along the smooth wood that stands testament to our shared labor. The sketch burns in my pocket like a secret I am not ready to surrender. 3 days pass before I see Rowan again. 3 days during which I move through my regular tasks with the mechanical precision of a man trying to convince himself that nothing has changed. I repair a loose board on the chicken coop, replace a worn belt on the tractor, help Miriam plant new flowers in the beds beside the front porch. But beneath these familiar activities, something restless moves through me like water, seeking its own level. On Sunday morning, Miriam discovers the sketch. I am in the barn, checking on a calf that has been favoring one leg, when I hear her voice calling my name from the house. There is something in her tone that makes me straighten, a quality I have learned to recognize after more than 2 decades of marriage. Not anger exactly, something deeper and more dangerous, something that sounds like understanding. I find her in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with the drawing unfolded in her hands. My shirt from Thursday evening lies beside her, the pocket turned inside out, and I realize with a sick certainty that she has been doing laundry, has discovered the secret I carried home like a stolen treasure. She looks up when I enter, and her expression is unreadable. The sketch shows my hands again, but this time they are not working. They are simply resting, palms up, captured in a moment of stillness that somehow conveys more intimacy than any embrace. It is the work of someone who has studied those hands closely, who has memorized the particular geography of knuckles and scars and calluses that map the history of a working life. I always wondered what it was you were keeping locked away, she says, her voice quiet but steady. Her fingers trace the edge of the paper with the same careful attention she brings to everything in her life. All these years, I could feel it, like a door in you that stayed closed no matter how close we became. I cannot find words to respond, cannot explain the terrible relief of being seen. Even like this, even in circumstances that threaten to unravel the careful life we have built together. I stand in the doorway of our bedroom, looking at my wife of 22 years, and feel the weight of decades of careful silence pressing against my chest like a stone. She sets the drawing on the bedside table, smoothing it flat with movements that are precise and deliberate. He draws you like someone who cares about what he sees. She observes, and there is no accusation in her voice. Only a kind of weary recognition, as though she has been waiting for this moment longer than either of us realize. Miriam, I begin, but she raises a hand to stop me. I am not angry, Elias. I should be, maybe, but mostly I am tired. Tired of pretending not to notice the way you look at things. The way you sometimes seem to be listening for something I cannot hear. She stands and walks to the window that looks out over the pasture, her figure silhouetted against the afternoon light. For a long moment, neither of us speaks. Then she turns back to me, and her eyes hold something I have never seen there before. Not forgiveness exactly, something more like permission. "I cannot give you what you need," she says simply. "I thought maybe time would change that, or love would be enough to fill whatever emptiness you carry. But some hungers cannot be satisfied by good intentions." The words hang between us like a bridge I am afraid to cross. Outside, a meadowlark calls from somewhere near the fence line, its song clear and piercing in the still air. "What happens now?" I ask, though I'm not certain I want to know the answer. She picks up the sketch again, studying it with the same attention she might give to a map of unknown territory. "Now you decide what kind of man you want to be," she says. "Whether you want to keep carrying this thing locked away inside you, or whether you want to see what happens when you finally let it breathe." That night, I walk out to the fence line as the sun sets, knowing somehow that Rowan will be there waiting for me. He stands beside the gate we repaired together, his hands resting on the top rail, his face turned toward the horizon where the last light bleeds slowly from the sky. I approach him slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs with a rhythm that feels both terrifying and inevitable. When I reach the fence, I place my hands on the rail beside his, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Miriam knows," I tell him, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. He nods, as though he has been expecting this. And I turn to look at him, then, this man who has somehow awakened something in me that I thought had died decades ago. His face is serious, patient, but I can see the question in his eyes, the careful hope he is trying not to let show. And I think it is time I stop being afraid of who I really am. The silence that follows is different from any we have shared before, not weighted with things unsaid, but pregnant with possibility, with the promise of words that might finally be spoken, truths that might finally be acknowledged, boundaries that might finally be crossed. The morning arrives with a clarity I have not known in decades. I wake before dawn, as has been my habit for most of my adult life, but today the familiar ritual feels different. The coffee tastes sharper. The air through the kitchen window carries scents, I swear, I have never noticed before. Even the ordinary sounds of the farm seem to possess a quality of presence that makes me pause and listen as though hearing them for the first time. Miriam's suitcase sits by the front door, packed with the efficiency that has characterized all her actions for as long as I have known her. She will stay with her sister in town for a while. She told me over breakfast, spoken without drama or accusation. Just a simple statement of fact, like observing that the weather has turned or that the cattle need water. I should feel guilt about this, should be overwhelmed by the magnitude of what is ending, the life we built together dissolving like sugar in rain. Instead, I feel something closer to gratitude, not for the pain I have caused her, but for the grace with which she has chosen to step aside, making space for something neither of us fully understands but both of us recognize as necessary. We do not embrace when she leaves, have not embraced in years, not in any way that carries real meaning. But she pauses at the door and looks back at me with eyes that hold 22 years of shared mornings and quiet evenings and the particular intimacy of two people who have witnessed each other's daily struggles to become the people they thought they should be. "Be careful, Elias," she says, and I know she's not talking about farm equipment or weather or any of the 100 small dangers that define rural life. Be careful with this gift you have been given. Not everyone gets a second chance to discover who they really are. Then she is gone, and the house settles into a silence that feels not empty but expectant, like a theater waiting for the next act to begin. I spend the morning walking my property, seeing it with eyes that seem to have been washed clean overnight. The fence line stands straight and strong, testament to the work Rowan and I completed together. But more than that, it no longer feels like a boundary designed to keep things separate. Instead, it has become something that connects, a shared border that belongs to both of us equally. The sun climbs higher, and I find myself returning again and again to the gate we repaired, my fingers tracing the smooth wood, remembering the rhythm we established working side by side. The memory carries weight now, significance that goes beyond the simple satisfaction of a job well done. It feels like the beginning of something larger, a foundation we have built without fully understanding what we intended to construct upon it. He appears just after noon, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing the same easy smile that first undid me weeks ago beside this very fence. But today there is something different in his expression, a quality of certainty that was not there before, as though he too has spent the morning reconciling himself to whatever truth we are about to acknowledge. Heard Miriam's car leave early, he says, settling beside me on the wooden rail we replaced together. Not as a question, but as a statement of fact, the way neighbors notice such things in a place where few secrets can be kept for long. She is staying with her sister for a while, I reply, surprised by how steady my voice sounds. We agreed it was best. He nods, pouring coffee into the thermos cap and offering it to me before filling his own cup. The liquid is strong and bitter, warming me from the inside as I search for words to describe what has been building between us for weeks, what finally broke through the surface last night when I admitted I was tired of being afraid. I have spent 45 years trying to be the man I thought I should be. I tell him, the confession emerging with surprising ease. And I have been reasonably successful at it. Good husband, decent father, reliable neighbor. All the things that make for a respectable life. But, he prompts gently, but it was never really my life. Never felt like something that belonged to me instead of something I was wearing like borrowed clothes that never quite fit properly. He is quiet for a long moment, studying the horizon where heat shimmer makes the distant hills dance like something insubstantial. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of someone who understands the particular courage it takes to admit such things. I came back here thinking I had failed at everything that mattered. The art, the love, the person I thought I was becoming in the city. Felt like I was retreating to the only place that would take me back, even if it meant giving up on ever becoming who I really wanted to be. And now I think maybe I was wrong about what failure looks like. Maybe coming back was not about giving up, but about finding something I could not see when I was so busy trying to become someone else. The silence that follows feels charged with possibility, electric with the recognition of something long denied finally being allowed to surface. I turn to look at him, this man who has somehow awakened parts of me I thought had been safely buried decades ago, and feel the last of my carefully constructed defenses crumble like old masonry, finally surrendering to time. I reach for his hand, and this time there is no hesitation, no careful testing of boundaries. Our fingers intertwine with the naturalness of something that has been waiting years to happen, and the rightness of it hits me with a force that makes my chest tight. For the first time in my adult life, I am not carrying the weight of being someone else. I am simply here, in this moment, holding the hand of a man who sees me clearly and chooses to stay anyway. The sun continues its arc across the sky, casting our shadows long against the earth as we sit together on the fence we built, talking quietly about the future we might construct together. Not grand plans or dramatic gestures, but the small, daily acts of attention that transform houses into homes and strangers into family. As evening approaches, we walk the fence line together, our steps synchronized, our shadows merging and separating like dancers learning a new rhythm. The wooden post stands straight and strong in the fading light. No longer a barrier between two separate worlds, but a foundation for something larger, something that belongs to both of us equally. At the far corner of the pasture, where the fence turns toward the setting sun, Rowan stops and pulls his sketchbook from his back pocket. But instead of drawing, he tears out a fresh page and hands it to me along with his pencil. Your turn, he says with a smile that holds decades of possibility. Show me how you see this place. Show me what you want to build here. I take the pencil, feeling its weight in my fingers like a tool I have been waiting my whole life to learn how to use. And for the first time, I begin to draw my own vision of the life I want to live, the love I want to nurture, the man I finally have the courage to become.